Hi everybody, I'm HikikomoriDev and welcome to MacIn-Cafe. Today I wanted to go ahead and do an informal announcement about VR on Macintosh. And as we may know, uh, VR on a Macintosh is highly lacking, and today I'd like to announce a social VR application on a Macintosh. And as you may know, there's been very little development, as in game development, for VR on the Mac. We have known that Steam VR on the Mac, the runtime has been discontinued for years as an Intel binary. And today we want to announce a new way to get into social VR on the Mac called MacIn-VR. And we would like to go ahead and make a new application for the Mac for social VR based on the Godot game engine, utilizing Godot XR. And we wanted to do this for a long time because the Macintosh definitely needs and desperately needs a social VR application. And as you can see, we are in the MacIn-Cafe here, and we are in VRChat, a PC VR application, which is unfortunate. So we are presenting MacIn-VR in a PC VR application, unfortunately. But that's how bad the situation is on the Mac, unfortunately, for VR. So we wanted to go ahead and fix that. We wanted to go ahead and give it a little twist, and we wanted to introduce social VR experiences on a Mac because we think that is really highly lacking in terms of getting a Mac computer into a VR experience at all. So we like what Apple is doing with Apple Vision and their headset and their mixed reality idea, but we want to bring that down to the consumer level. As you may know, Apple Vision is a enterprise headset. It's a mixed reality thing. It's not a game type of situation where you can get into like a social VR application. It's more of mixed reality experiences. And what we want to do is just do standalone VR on the Mac. We want to be able to just put on the headset and get on VR. So we believe that while Apple Vision is a highly intelligent VR system, we want to go ahead and bring them down to a consumer level. So essentially what we want to do is to have a base model Mac Mini M4 and a base level Quest headset, such as the Quest 3S, and bring those two together and have the entire Mac experience, Mac VR experience right there for you, instead of having to purchase a very high-end headset that is not meant for such social VR experiences. What we want to do is to make sure that you can go to your local retail store and purchase a base level Mac and a base level Quest 3S headset, and that's all your needs for a Mac VR experience. And so that's really what we want to accomplish. So the situation on the Mac and VR is not very good, as we may know. There is no VR runtime. There is no social VR application. So we would like to fix that. And what we want to do is two components, mainly two components. We want to have a component that is actually the social VR application, and we wanted to make that based off Godot. We wanted a game engine that was open source because we believe that in the future we would like to go ahead and take control of that game engine environment and design environment and tailor it to our needs, and our needs are for the Mac, and we wanted to go ahead in case someday we wanted to recompile the game engine or readapt it to our needs or pre-package it with a networking middleware solution, be able to do that without any licensing hurdles or anything like that. So we chose Godot for that main reason, is that someday we might be able to recompile it to our own needs, and that's extremely important. And we have Godot game engine, and we like to go ahead and top that off with Godot XR, which is the virtual reality module for Godot game engine. So we want to use Godot XR for to bring the entire thing into a virtual reality level. That is the framework that Godot uses. So that's really what we want to do, is to have Godot, and of course we want to have Godot XR. And of course that running below that is Apple Silicon. MacIn-VR is a Apple Silicon application. We do not intend to target Intel Macintosh because uh, of the way that the Intel frameworks. It's an entire different architecture that we feel that even though it's you know Intel Macintoshes are were great in computers, but they're last decade, and we want to push on to the next this decade and on to the next, and so we want to have Apple Silicon as our architecture. So our Apple Silicon and Godot, and then Godot XR, and then what we have to take care of for our social VR application is middleware. Most of the effort for MacIn-VR is going to be middleware. As you may know, there's very little VR in Mac. Really, we can talk about Apple Vision, and we can talk about Apple Immerse VR. Those applications are working and are available on the Mac. But again, there's no large framework to make all this work, especially on the consumer level. So our mission is to be able to write some of that work ourselves because it doesn't exist on the Mac. And we need to we need to develop frameworks for example, networking modules that work natively on the Mac. We also have another component that we have to work on, and that is the VR runtime on the Mac. And as you may know, Steam VR on a Mac is an x86 application, a Mac x86 application that hasn't been updated for years. It's a very ancient Intel thing that's not available on Silicon Mac. So we the bulk of the work for MacIn-VR is going to be that wrapper ecosystem, that VR wrapper ecosystem, that VR runtime system that does not exist right now on the Mac. And we are looking at things out there that are pretty promising, but they take a little bit of implementation. And we've been looking at Monato VR for a runtime. And of course, Monato VR is a framework, a VR runtime framework that is open source, that is currently, I believe, running on Windows and Linux machines. And we believe that there are some hurdles in the Mac port, but there has been some talks in the GitHub that to have availability on the Mac. And as you may know, Monato VR is a multi-BK application. It is not a metal application. So we'll be in the early days of MacIn-VR, we'll be working in Molten-BK, and we'll be working on Metal APIs. Metal APIs possibly going to be Godot, as Godot is transitioning to a native Metal application. But the runtime for MacIn-VR and overall the Mac, this is a runtime that will encapsulate many VR applications on the Mac, will be Monato VR or something of that similar nature. We need a runtime. So we're working with I will admit, we're working with a tall order for MacIn-VR. We're working for a runtime that doesn't exist yet on the Mac, and we're working with two graphical APIs, Molten-BK and Metal. But we believe we can do it with some investment and some attention from prosperous players, a future player base on the Mac. And we're currently, one of the reasons this world exists is we are currently trying to recruit players from many VR platforms like VRChat and Chill Out VR to gain interest in players to test our application. Our application will be first for very few versions, and early alphas and even betas will be desktop only, because we have to develop the frameworks. For example, middleware for networking. We want to make sure that the application sort of works correctly before we actually do anything in VR. So we want to develop the Godot base first of the VR application, and then from there we can take care of, as we said, Molten-BK, Monato VR as a VR wrapper and VR runtime on a Mac, and that's going to be a little bit of a tall order because this is something that nobody else has done before. So we're really looking into making a social VR experience on a Mac that has been lacking for years. In fact, a decade. As we may know, VRChat was the first social VR application that was available, and that's why they're right now kind of the main application because they were there first. And unfortunately, the Mac missed that because of course people were not thinking about DK1 on the Mac. That was quite unfortunate. But now we're thinking about this, and we really think that the horsepower of the Apple Silicon chip will really greatly help us. And you should be able to get base model Macintosh computers, both mobile and desktop machines, hooked up to a consumer level Quest VR headset, and that should be your experience right there. You shouldn't need any more. You shouldn't have to, do things, swap out cards, open computers. You should just be able to grab, unwrap, and run, and that's it. That's what we want to do, is have the simplicity of the Macintosh down to VR. So we really, this is somewhat of a tall order, we must admit. We're really working with graphics frameworks, and as I said, we don't have a streamer application on the Mac. We don't have a runtime on the Mac for VR. So we hope to adopt a Monado VR or something similar for that architecture, so we can stream the desktop application onto the headset and probably get us going. So first order of development is our desktop application. We also like to talk about another thing that we wanted to mention, is that our VR experiences here at Kawaii Basic are desktop experiences, non-mobile experiences. So what we really want to have is a couch experience of sorts. So we love the Macintosh, and we would like to have a companion to the Macintosh, and we've talked about things about the Pippin, the Bandai Pippin, and how that didn't turn out the way that Apple wanted around 3 decades ago. And we want to continue. We want to fix that legacy. We want to take the legacy, and we want to reintroduce that legacy. So we would like to, on the side, after we get the Mac version sorted out, we're not going to offer any Intel Mac versions. We're not going to offer any Watch OS versions. We're not going to offer any iOS versions. This is going to be solely a couch experience thing, or a stand-up experience, as I might say. You're not going to be running around with MacIn-VR on a mobile device. So the best device that we want to use as a companion device for MacIn-VR on the Mac desktop version, of course, is the Apple TV box version of MacIn-VR. And as we developed the Godot version of MacIn-VR, we really thought that maybe perhaps we should be having a companion application. But the problem is that the companion version will not be running on Godot, unfortunately, because there are some challenges to getting Godot running on the Apple TV box. But what we want to do is an experiment, proof of concept, that we can have two game engines working together, side by side, on a single platform. So what does this mean? What does this really mean at the end of the day? Is that since Apple TV has Unity native support, so there is no problem with that. We never intended to do a native version of MacIn-VR on Unity, because as we talked about how we can take the open source nature of Godot and recompile it and redo it and make it our own little engine in the future with our team. Unfortunately, we cannot do that on Apple TV. Apple TV tvOS does not permit us to use Godot as the game engine, because there hasn't been a compile for Apple TV, and there's no framework around the Apple Store for that. So what we want to do is a proof of concept, more like a little hobby, like Steve said back a few decades ago. We want to make a MacIn-VR on the Apple TV box a hobby for us, and a proof of concept that we're a competent team. And we want to have a little version of MacIn-VR running on the Apple TV under Unity. So we wanted to make experiences with SDKs where developers can, for example, port their avatars onto Apple TV and their maps onto Apple TV, and sort of sync that together with the backend of our application. So that means syncing and time issues and resolving all of that into middleware. MacIn-VR essentially is a lot of middleware in the burger. You have the hamburger, you got the bread, and then you got burger, and the chunk of that, the burger, is going to be middleware on the Mac, because it doesn't exist to begin with. So networking middleware, MVR runtime middleware. So we believe that we can transfer the Godot experience onto the Unity experience to some limited form on the Apple TV because we believe the Apple TV is a great companion to the Macintosh computer. Apple TV, as you may know, it's $129 for a base model, so it's an entire game console on your Apple TV set, and that's great. We believe that the Apple TV can be used in many places of the world where a Macintosh computer otherwise couldn't be afforded. Even though the Mac Mini is already a highly affordable computer, we believe that $129, anyone in the third world, so-called third world, could potentially afford a Apple TV box to play our platform, our massive MMO, VR MMO on the Apple TV as a desktop experience. So we would like to have Apple TV as a side experience for people to try out MacIn-VR on desktop. There won't be any VR controls, of course, because it's Apple TV, but we would like them to have a taste of what MacIn-VR is, and they can possibly go onto the Macintosh after. So that's a little bit of that. We want to make a little bit of middleware so that our Unity game engine, at least our MacIn-VR in Unity engine, can cooperate with Godot XR through a very intelligent server infrastructure that we are developing. That's again our middleware. Middleware everywhere, middle everywhere, because it's not available on the Mac. There hasn't been any of that before. So we are looking for players, and we like everybody to come into the MacIn-Cafe at some time and speak to us and see what you like us to do with the MacIn-VR. Maybe we can start creating a DMG file and control click for for beta software, alpha software, so you can test it out on your macOS machine. Our requirements are just an Apple-based Silicon Mac. You should be able to use a MacIn-VR on an Apple Silicon system, M1 and upwards. So we're not requiring M4, but we like the greatest and best because that's what we have at Apple is innovation, right? So we like to have that type of situation. It's ideally an M4, but should work in all Apple Silicon systems. And in the future, near future, we want to push that off to the Apple television box and see what great things we can share in the industry. We want to push VR and the Mac forward. That's really our priorities, to push an entire VR ecosystem on the Mac. As we spoke before, we think that Apple Vision and their headset are great experiences, but we like to tackle the problem that it is right now, and that is the lack of VR experiences on a Mac in a consumer level. For example, there's no equivalent of Chill Out VR or VRChat on Mac. We would like to fix that. We like to also implement our runtimes for other VR applications, such as education, and we like to work with other enterprise companies in order to get funding. We like to, be a leader in the Mac and VR experience. So we hope you support us. And to sort of explain on that, we would like to go ahead and raise funding. We like to go ahead and raise funds because we need developers. We need infrastructure, essentially. We want to start out MacIn-VR as a peer-to-peer experience. I think many of us have forgotten about peer-to-peer in VR, and I think many have misinterpreted what peer-to-peer VR really is. So what we like to do is to introduce that and slowly integrate it onto a centralized server. So MacIn-VR should be able to be ran on peer-to-peer, but also should be able to have a centralized server. So we would like to have both. We like the choice of MacIn-VR. MacIn-VR is a plugin-based application. We have Godot at the center, and we would like to have people writing plugins for MacIn-VR. We don't use mods. We use plugins in MacIn-VR. We want to be able for people to modify the core of MacIn-VR, while our systems also have security checks, of course, on our clients and third-party clients. Server-side security checks should be everywhere. But we want the flexibility of people being able to write plugins. And so we would like people to be able to manipulate the core of MacIn-VR through plugins. Of course, not as a security exploit, but as a feature thing. So if somebody wants to write a plugin so that MacIn-VR can be ran on some multi-BK shader or something, you should be able to use plugins for that. MacIn-VR is a plugin architecture application. So we want to make it flexible for our players to modify, the experience while still having security checks on our backend servers. And we're intending it to use Docker for our solution in the backend. So we can, so it's highly portable and can be ran on many nodes from the M4 Mac Mini all the way to the Mac Pro M4. And somebody, as again, it's a plugin based architecture. So somebody can write, suite for Linux, for example, for a specific distribution of Linux. They should be able to write a backend that runs a server on Linux. It's because it's a Docker solution, so it can even run on Microsoft Windows if you like. So if it's Docker, you can run it anywhere. But we basically want it to be Docker so that it's highly portable and you can optimize it as well. Docker container modules on the server side. That's for our developers to know. So running onto the developer situation and infrastructure situation, we want to make MacIn-VR as great as we can, but I will admit that I can't do this all myself. I mean, talking about a runtime on a Mac, a VR runtime on a Mac is quite a tall order. So we are looking for developers, but for that we're looking for funding. We're not looking for, we're looking for part-time, semi-full-time developers, and we want to make sure we have a solid team that, wants to work with such project, and so they need to be in some sort of salary. So we need to raise funds, and we are really thinking about ICOs, and we're really thinking about crypto funding. We want to make sure that many players around the world can fund our initiative, and we really think that cryptocurrency is the way to go. We believe that cryptocurrency is adopted in many places of the world. And we believe that is the most flexible way of funding, and so we are looking to many ways of funding, and we really want to start an ICO. And to that, we need to do it through we need to do it through probably Ethereum, but we also want to accept Bitcoin. We also want to accept Dogecoin. We are lovers of Dogecoin, and the latest development are great. So we are open for donations, we are open for funding, and we are open for crypto funding. We are really interested in crypto funding. If you, however, cannot do that, there's always a buy me a coffee link that you can use your traditional debit card, a Visa, a Cirrus or Maestro, or whichever type of debit card you have. Buy Me Coffee or Patreon as well will support it. But we really like our flexibility of being able to have complete control for funding, and we have a pay shoot link that you can also use for funding. But we really want to start an ICO through cryptocurrency. That's really our goal, is to have flexible financing that can flex around the world for our players, because we believe that VR experiences should be international, not centralized in the first world, not centralized in the third world, but centralized around the entire planet. And we believe cryptocurrency is the best way to go. So we hope you like our initiative. We hope that you come and talk to us. We're available in VRChat. Unfortunately, we have to be, because that's where we are. But we believe that many of our players that we are recruiting will come from Quest headsets, because of course they're not on a PC. They're probably on a Mac, and if you're on a Mac, there's no social VR application. You're probably on a Quest headset. So you're welcome to come in to the MacIn-Cafe. This is the dynamic light version, of course. This is not available on Quest, but it is available on PC. But there is a version that's both available on PC and Quest that has baked lighting. So we hope to see you around. And around April 24th, we really want to have an event, a fundraising event, to another Mac world, Mac world, Mac VR world, that should allow us to have a nice, round table and a talk about. The current situation on VR and a Mac. But we really, really hope that you and your friends on the Macintosh come and talk to us, because we really would like to get out there and talk about this, since it's a little bit tough to get known around these days. So we thank you very much. We thank you for your attention, and please excuse our informal, meeting here. But we would like to start out small and have a slow progression of things. My name is HikikomoriDev, and here we are in MacIn-Cafe. And thank you very much for your attention. Bye bye.